Welcome to Living Life and Love with Vitiligo. I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. This is a global vitiligo awareness and education podcast. You will hear the true and authentic stories from people living with vitiligo. You'll also hear from their loved ones, medical professionals, licensed mental health therapists, relationship counselors, global vitiligo support foundations and organizations, and so much more. Sit back and enjoy living life and love with vitiligo. Once again, I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to Living Life and Love with Vitiligo. I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. And on my show today, I have Pat Rossy. So welcome, Pat.
Well, thank you, Mark. I am so excited to be on your show, Living and Loving with Vitiligo. So
Living life and love. That's right. Look, I messed it up a few times myself because it happens. You know, it's one of those things. And Pat, you and I go back a ways. Actually, once I came into the community, you know, I had a chance to work with you through Vit Friends and had a chance to meet you and Richard and a few other people from the community. But go ahead and officially introduce yourself to our listeners, viewers, watchers, and then we'll get into our vitiligo discussion.
Okay. Well, my name is Pat Rossy, as you stated. I am 66 years old. I am married to my wonderful husband, Richard. We are celebrating our ending of 27 years, and we have 3 sons, 8 grand, and 1.5 great grand. And I am from the Boogie Down Bronx.
You know what? And all the 80s songs all the 80s rap songs started popping in my head, but yeah. So, and for our viewers, this might be a crazy conversation because Pat loves to laugh, crack jokes. I'm right with you. Let's just do it and have fun. So let's get into that big discussion about vitiligo. I know when people hear vitiligo, they automatically think patches on the skin, maybe on your face, spotted all over. But then there's the type of vitiligo that we don't talk about a lot, and that is universal. And for our listeners, there'll be more information at the end of this discussion about universal. But Pat, do you want to share with them what universal is?
Well, for me, universal is loss of all your color from head to toe. There's no space that is black like I am.
Absolutely. And people that watch this conversation to the end, they'll see a picture of you before vitiligo and you now living with vitiligo, and then they'll understand what do you mean by that. And that's one of the things about, I think, with vitiligo is so mysterious. You know, you can have all of your pigmentation today, and then in a couple of weeks, it could be all gone.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can.
Absolutely.
Or like I am, as you stated, universal. But it didn't start out that way. I had the white patches here and there, mostly dominating my hands.
Right.
So I don't know why people don't pay attention to people's hands, but they don't. And I got vitiligo in 97. Elbows, 1 elbow at a time. I was fine because you can't see that.
Right.
But gradually, you know, spots here and there. 2004 is when it was like, uh-oh, I can't pretend,
Right.
so to speak. So still not totally. And this is 97 to 2004. But then 2005 came. I had foot surgery.
Mm.
And from 2005 to 2007, I lost all my color.
Wow. And this is something, it's quite interesting because we had our vitiligo around the same time. Mine started 95, 96.
Mm-hmm.
And some people have even questioned, well, do you have vitiligo? Yeah, I can show you my hands on the screen. As you see, looks like my arm disappeared because of my because of my watch. But I don't have much on my face. I'm starting to develop more spots on my neck. I do have it around my mouth, but I have facial hair. You can't see it. But the rest of my body is spotted. My feet are almost all white. Hands, almost all white. Spots all over my legs. But it's different for every person. And as Pat said, you could be spotted one day and something could happen that changes all that. And yours was the surgery.
Yes. And I mean, I could literally see my skin change in front of my eyes. You've heard people say you go to sleep one day and wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was me. I was like, up, and I knew when a spot was coming because it itched. And the next day, boom. And that was how I knew. No, I didn't know I was getting vitiligo, but it made sense once I had vitiligo because before the spot came, I was scratching Mark so hard that my mother, God rest her soul, she said, you are going to scratch your skin off the bone. That's how bad it itched.
Right.
I mean, that didn't happen, but white spots.
Yep. And for people that don't know about vitiligo, that is a big part of it. That vitiligo itch. And it was interesting, not everyone experiences that, but I do. Like I could be scratching, thinking mosquito bite, oh, let me go put some lotion on. No, it's another white patch developing.
Yep. Yes, because I know, especially, I also have alopecia. Mm-hmm. So autoimmune. So that's part of vitiligo. But the head, I used to tell my husband, just let me use like the little short paring knife. If I could just get under the itch.
Mm-hmm.
And he kept looking at me like I was crazy, but he understood that was the intensity of the itch.
And there's nothing you can't put Benadryl, itch away. None of that stuff is going to work.
Nope.
It's an itch. Now my feet, because I told you they're mainly white, I could feel that itch, and it's like, oh gosh, But you're right. You got to scratch it. If you don't, it's gonna drive you nuts.
Yes, literally. So I understand the itch came with a patch.
Yeah.
And so it was like, it was a process. I'm like, okay, so what's the next, location? Always that. I couldn't see my back. But then I had my eyes.
Right.
And then I think for me, between early 2007 and I'll say February, my face was like, okay. By June, it was like, oh, you do have color, but what color?
Right.
Went to a dermatology conference. This is before VitFriends.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing Dermablend. And I was standing on the line with Valerie. And the lady couldn't see me. But when she turned around, Mark, it looked like her life left her body because it was like, okay, so what color can I use? That's how far I was gone, that I could have got the white makeup or the brown makeup. And I said to her, I was just messing with you.
And you know what? And what's so crazy about it? When you are losing color, it's like 3 tones. You got the white when there's no color. You got that really light in between. You're kind of looking at it, and then you have your natural color.
It's like you orange.
But you're right. You can't really describe it. And there are times I look at my hand, I'm going, oh, it's turning white, but it's like I'm already light, and there's a light, and there's a light, and there's the white, you know. And you know, it is funny working with kids. I've been asked, am I mixed? You know, are you white or are you? I'm like, no, I said I'm black. I'm light skin, you know, but I said the white parts of my skin is where there's no color.
Right.
That's what it looks like when you have no color.
Exactly.
And they're like, oh.
and that really doesn't mean anything because they still don't know what you're talking about.
They have no idea.
Exactly.
Now, with the spread, let's talk about emotions, because we don't talk about that a lot in our community at times. We may share with our close friends, but I think we kind of forget about the emotional impact of watching yourself change, and you can't stop it. There's nothing you can do.
So one of my most annoying, my all-time annoying was the subway, because the subway, there's everybody, but there are people who know how to look, and then there are people who are drooling and looking. But I have plenty of those stories, but the one that kind of, I guess it messed with my integrity of my race was I sat next to a Caucasian woman and I was reading a book. So, of course, the hand is turning pages. It was a real book. So, my hand is turning pages. And the lady literally put her hand out and she's flipping it back and forwards, and then she puts it back, and I'm turning the page, and she puts her hand out again, and she's looking. She didn't have on nail polish. She didn't have on a ring. She didn't have on a bracelet. And I'm saying to myself, if this lady put her hand out one more time, instead of me changing the page, I might have to backslap her, because I knew that she was comparing her hands, my hands.
Right.
And like, what are you that you have two colors? And why am I looking like this? That was like, it was annoying, but I was analyzing and I was like, oh, if she knew that I was Black, because it could have looked like age spots to her or something else. But it was like, have some dignity with your thoughts, because if that's your thought, then keep it to yourself. Then you have the people who lift their glasses, and I'm like, okay, these are clear. You could see I could see your face, so you wanted me to see that you were looking at me through your sunglasses, so you lift your glasses up, and I would do the same. But it was like, what difference does it make how I look?
Right.
The thought that people were not understanding that I was a human being, opposed to, like an alien.
Right.
Or I wasn't disfigured. Like, I didn't have a cast on my body or tape across my face. So the ignorance, I think, messed with my identity. Like, and I say, there's a piece in the film, I say, you think once you're all one color, people will stop staring at you. But no,
No, they would keep staring.
They still stare.
They're trying to figure you out. They're trying to figure out, wait a minute. She looks Black, but she's white, only in color. But I don't know. And
is she albino?
Right.
Now, I've gotten that.
I've heard that before too.
I've gotten that. And I like to tell people, wow, you're really ignorant, huh? Because see, now I can get a dig in while you're, making like stupid comments to me.
Right.
So,
and Pat, one of the things I always say, as we're living in the future, from back when there was no technology. Exactly. And you think about it, we have access to all this information, but we don't use it properly.
No, not at all.
It's simple. White patches on the skin. Vitiligo pops up. Read it, And
Is
I
it
find
contagious? No, it
no,
pops up.
right. And people they don't like to self-educate themselves, Like,
Why?
do it. You have the phone. Get off TikTok, get off Facebook and Instagram, and actually look up the information.
Exactly. And you can do it while you're standing in front. Listen, you have Google now.
Right.
You can just take a picture of me.
Yep. Absolutely.
And I'll come up because I'm famous. No, only
Hey, but it's those things with vitiligo we have to deal with, no matter how much you have, how much spread you have or not. You still get those stares, you get those looks. I recall sitting in a restaurant eating, and when the first Opsilor commercial came on, there was a gentleman sitting directly across from me, and he was looking at the commercial, and I was looking at it too, and I could just feel him staring at me. So I'm eating, and I looked over, he looked at me, and I just shook my head like, yeah, I have the same thing, yes. And he just smiled. He didn't say anything, but I think he recognized, wait a minute, this guy over here has the same thing as the guy on TV.
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So like you were talking about the identity, and it's funny how it could switch from day to day, depending on the emotions that you wake up with.
Right.
It doesn't have to do with your vitiligo, but I learned through my vitiligo that I'm not the same person. I can't be like just, I have to defend myself. So my identity has changed into like a, a guard,
Right.
if
Right.
that makes sense. I have to guard my emotions. I have to guard what I say to people, because I've said it before. I could have been incarcerated during my transition
Yeah.
because people are so ignorant that they make you change who you are. You know, you have to set yourself up to be positive when you leave the house while you're going through this change. And then all you need to do is bump into a not so bright person.
Right.
And then you have to decide, am I going to get my ghetto card out or my let me educate you card?
Hey, it unfortunately we have to fight those battles. When we're dealing with the public. Those are those battles that people don't know. Um, we're fighting them almost every day. Um, some days it's easy to fight it.
Yeah.
Some days I got the quick comeback. I'm good. I can crack a joke. There are days I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to address, why my hands look different, why my legs are spotted. Just know it's hot and I'm wearing shorts. Okay, I'm going to the mall. I don't like to go to the mall, but I'm going shopping.
But
Target, Walmart, or something. Yeah. Like I don't want to always answer the questions, and it like you said, depends on what how my emotions when I get out the bed, when I start my day. Some days maybe I'm not in a good mood. I'm human. There are things already on my mind, and then you're gonna start asking me about my skin color. No, focus on something else.
I'm happy to be universal. I am.
Right.
But because I am, now I have to approach vitiligo people differently. I I can I used to be like the jumping jack jelly bean when I saw somebody with vitiligo, and they're not happy, but I'm
Right.
happy.
Right.
They're like, why are you so happy? I'm like, cause I'm meeting you, and and they're like, I hate this. I'm
Right.
like, yeah, but so you're trying to explain, life is good regardless, and that even if you feel bad, you can't look like you feel bad because people will treat you bad.
Right.
So I kind of stopped that now. Like I see people, and depending on how they look, what identity they're giving me,
right, right,
then I can be like, hi, how you doing? I see you have vitiligo. Me too.
right.
Because, you know, if you're new, you don't know.
Absolutely.
And the first thing, out of 9 out of 10 people, I can't wait till I get there. And you have to explain to them that's not the end for everyone.
Right.
There are middles. I think about Shirley Walcott. Now, I've known her since 2000, I'll say 2007. She's had vitiligo all her life. She looks the same whenever you see her. And you said that you're light skinned. Well, my girl is more
right.
light skinned.
Right.
And so you don't really see the vitiligo because it's just how she looks.
Right.
So when people see you and you say vitiligo, they're like, because people do have this unnatural hue skin, and they don't.
You know, I know exactly what you're saying, Pat. Because some people do feel like, well, if I reach universal, I'll have one complexion. But no matter what stage you're at, you may not stay there.
Right.
You could be universal and start repigmenting.
Hello.
Or you could be like me, where I feel like I'm stable, but now I'm starting to develop more spots up on my face, my neck area. It's been like this. I haven't had spots progress on my face since I had vitiligo.
Okay.
But I don't know what it's going to do now, you know?
Exactly.
And I say those moments you have to decide, am I going to live? Am I going to let it, you know, take me down? And I'm going to be honest, I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to feel if I have more spots develop on my face, more on my neck, you know?
Let me tell you about repigmenting. Oh my God. I think we were in Jamaica. I know we were somewhere where it was warm. Not that I was laying out in the sun. So I'm washing my face and putting my cream on. And I had 1, 2, 3 black spots. So of course, I always go back to Val. I was like, oh, what's that? And I'm wiping. I got the washcloth, which I don't use on washcloths on my face. But I was like, oh, this must be chocolate. I ain't had no chocolate, but you know, you like, and I'm rubbing, and I'm like, oh no. I called Richard. I was like, babe, look at this. And he's like, oh, you must have had too much sun. I'm like, I wasn't in the sun. I was like, devil, go back where you came from. And do you know, by the time, I'll say a month later, those spots were gone.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm wearing a hat forever.
Right. But that's the mystery of vitiligo. We think it's gonna stay like this forever, or it's gonna stop. Some people it has stopped, and as it progressed, some of us it progresses really fast. And I look at some people that are freshly new to vitiligo, and I'm looking at the amount of pigmentation they've lost. And I'm like, well, why is it different for me? I've had it longer. It has progressed slower, but for this person, it's really aggressive. You know, we don't have an answer.
I always say it's in the chicken.
Oh gosh, is it Bojangles? Is it Church's? Is it the General's chicken? If they saw the movie, they know what I'm talking about when I say the Generals or the Colonels. There's a couple of movies. Was it? I think the Generals is in They Clone Tyrone. So yeah, it could be in the chicken.
It's the cheapest meat to buy.
but you know what? I think too it's how we respond to emotions. You know, I know last school year was a little tough. You know, it was very emotional. I had a student that he could not contain his anger. So he fought a child or 2 or 3, sometimes 4 every day. Every day. And
I like the way you started at 1 and then you went all the way up.
He would have fought the whole class if I would have let him. But watching a child that can't control his emotions, can't control it. Like he would black out. He wouldn't even remember. But then looking at the other students who some were enraged because they wanted to fight back.
Of course.
Some that were in fear. And then you're still trying to teach. And I think for me, it was emotional because it's like, what can I really do to help this child? You know, there are things beyond what teaching can do.
Exactly.
There are some things that's beyond what medicine can do. There's some things you might have to lay hands on people. But anyway.
Are you talking about in a churchy way?
Well, yeah. I often say when you are entertaining and teaching and working with the general public, you don't know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I'm just saying. Oh, speaking of that, and for people that don't know about vitiligo, it is not leprosy.
Oh,
let me say that again. It is not leprosy.
What? I didn't know that. I just, oh man, you messing me up.
Look, and I joke about that because that is something we hear all the time. Is it leprosy? It is not. And I actually saw an article that circulated on Facebook calling it white leprosy. No, leprosy is contagious. It is deadly. Vitiligo is not contagious. We can't spread it. It is not deadly. It is not leprosy. And don't call it vertigo because it's not pronounced vertigo. It is called vitiligo.
But and vertigo, even if there's no R.
No.
So,
and for my listeners, we laugh about this. These are things we hear all the time. And some things we can laugh at. Some things are a little more serious. But it comes with the territory. And for people that may not understand, the underlying factor for vitiligo is an autoimmune disease, but it causes the condition vitiligo. So you may hear us go between disease, condition, disease, condition. If we are trying to get funding from the government or talking to medical professionals, we'll use the term disease. And if we're talking to the general public, friends, whatever, we would say condition. But just know vitiligo is not contagious. I cannot touch somebody and turn them white. I can't. That would be a cool power if I could just touch you and make you change whatever. I don't know about changing colors, but make you
superpower. It'd have to go both ways, though.
Yeah, you have to switch you back and forth.
And black another day, or whatever your race might be.
Change your green, purple, different colors of the rainbow. Hey, come here. You want to be orange today? There you go. But it's one of those. Now, let me say this. I couldn't always laugh at vitiligo. So I don't want people thinking, oh, he's just taking it lightly. He doesn't take it serious. No, I struggled with it up until 2019. 2019, I kind of had to refocus my view of it because I never talked about it. I never had a conversation with anybody about it. I didn't know about the community. Although Katrina hunted me down, I think at every festival, out of all the people in Raleigh, thousands of people could be out there. She would always find me.
Like, because you were needed.
Yeah, and she would give me a card, and I would look at it. It's like, I don't need this. It's like going to a AA session. You know, I'm not going to that mess. You know, that was my mindset.
That's a lot of people with vitiligo. That's their mindset, and they will always say, "No, I'm good." And I would say, "Well, if you're good, you are great for the community of people with vitiligo because they need to get to be where you are."
But you know what? Sometimes we don't have a choice. I used to always say, I'm good. I'm good. And that was my response. I'm good. I'm good. I ran into a nephew. Hey, you know, my aunt has this community of people. Thank you. I already got 2 cards. I'm good. I don't need another one. But that was my attitude because I was at the angry stage.
Yeah.
Like I had this chip on my shoulder. Because I have this change, can't stop it. And then I was dating somebody who used to clown me about my sweaters because I used to wear these long sweaters to hide my hands. And why you keep wearing those Mr. Rogers sweaters? And I'm like, you know what? Okay, all right. Yeah, so you know, these are things. I still got my sweaters too. I will rock them when it gets cold. But I don't hide anymore. But what I had to do, Pat, and for the listeners, there was a girl in my school. The mom wanted support. And I had to say, okay, let me put my pride aside and provide support for this little girl by talking about my story. And I did. And it was cool. And I felt good about it. Next thing you know, I was in the North Carolina community. Next thing you know, I was in Vit Friends. Next thing you know, I was telling my story on the radio. I'm like, what's happening?
One person can make you change your
Right.
whole attitude, because this vitiligo can make you live in a box.
Right.
You
Right.
you might be functioning outside of the box,
Right.
but you're in the box. You know, my thing was always the subway. You know, that walk down the street, and I had 23 stops to go. So it's like I was counting my stops. In the morning when I got up, I had my my self awareness. You are beautiful. You know, no matter what people see, with how they look, just remember that you're beautiful. Don't react. So you have to, sometimes you have to talk to yourself so that yourself could get you where you want to go. Now
Absolutely.
you didn't want to go. I always tell people my biggest fear, sorry airplane, my biggest fear was that I was going to lose my job. And not really understanding why I thought that, because I told you it was 97 when I started working for my boss. That at that time it was 2001. So there wasn't really too much going on, but I still was basking in the sun, but I was front of house. I was the representative of the company. I mean, it was just the two of us, but still,
right.
When people came, it was me.
Right.
And then him. He was already white. So
right.
that didn't matter. And I said, I have this thing called vitiligo. No need to have said it if it wasn't becoming visible. And he's like, and I was like, well, I just listen. He was like, the type of attitude that you have, no one's going to see that. And I thought about it, and that changed my perspective on how I saw myself, because, people always say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But if you're not beholding yourself,
right,
you don't see beauty. And so that made me see beauty in myself, because I never really thought I was, all that in a bag of chips. I'm a double pack now. So, but it took the vitiligo and the transformation
right.
from one person to another person, same spirit, same
right.
attitude, but it's bolder now. It's like like people stare at me and I'm like, what? I'm like, and but I didn't have that when I was going through that
right.
transition. It was like, I gotta deal with these ignorant a-holes.
Right.
Like, for 23 going down and then 23 coming back. God forbid we get stuck.
but it's a real challenge and a real battle we have to deal with. But you have to decide. That's why I call this living life in love. You have to decide how you're going to live your life. The vitiligo is going to do whatever it's going to do. It's going to present those moments where you have to face not only other people, you got to face yourself.
Exactly.
That's what that love too, because we got to love ourselves, And I had low self-esteem. I'm not gonna front. My self-esteem was shot. There were some other personal things I had gone through, and then trying to, restart relationships and all this. All that stuff impacts you, and then you look different from other people.
Exactly.
No matter where you go, you're gonna look different. No matter what we do, go to the beach, you're gonna look different. Go to the airport, you're gonna look different. Go to the mall, you're gonna look different. I'm standing in front of my class, I'm gonna look different. Speaking of airports, I heard you say airplane. It made me think about going through airport security. I always get flagged for the patch on this hand.
Okay.
Always. They'll tell me go through that little machine and and then they'll pull me to the side. I need to see your wrist. dude, that's not going anywhere. That's white patch. And once they look at it, they're like, oh, and it going through. Vitiligo, yes, gets flagged in the airport sometimes. It
That's funny because my funny airport thing was we get to Jamaica and I'm this lovely no colored skin, and one of the ladies that I guess she worked in the airport, she had the audacity. She's like, you better get you some color. And I didn't say,
she didn't know.
Right. I didn't say nothing. I was like, well, I sure hope she ain't here when I come back, because I ain't gonna have no color. And I'm gonna be, when you got there, and like sometimes we're there for 2 weeks. Well, what is she doing? Let me see that white girl go. You need to check her. She must be bringing drugs or something. Because usually they don't, they not hanging out. They hiding out for the backup.
and that's a crazy thing. I've been asked to, does vitiligo skin tan? No, there's no melanocytes. They're too tan. There's nothing there. There's no pigmentation. It will not tan. If you have pigmentation, everything else will tan. I don't know if you can see it on my hand, my wrist. Well, I wear my watch. It's a little tan there. But no, if I go in the sun, I'm going to tan, but my hands are going to be white. My legs, I might need to go out, walk in the sun a little bit, get a little tan on my legs. But the white patches are going to stay white, no matter what.
You might get a pink hue.
Pink. There we go. Yep.
And staying out the sun is not the only answer.
Yeah.
Because it could be you on the ocean on a cruise, you sitting in the shade, but the breeze is blowing and the sun is shining on the water, and that breeze got the sun in it. And I have been peachy pink on a cruise, staying in the shade. So because there's nothing to the heat, I don't even like being in that humid heat, because the body seems to warm up, and then when it warms up, you start getting pink. It was like, you was in the sun. I was like, I was with you. Were we in the sun?
Right. And I'm glad you said about the pink, because I've had kids say, why is your skin so red? We just came from outdoors at recess. Yes, my brown is brown, but where I have no pigmentation turns red. Yes. We were outside. Even if I wear sunscreen.
Yeah. It just gives you a layer of protection so it doesn't burn.
Right.
It still gets red.
Yeah, makes you the true red bone, as we used to say.
But
there are some people in our community, and you have to know your skin, because some people burn easily. They can go outside within 20 minutes, they burn. I don't burn easily. I don't test that theory too much either. I can go outside for about an hour.
Okay.
But then I don't stay out there too long. But then again, I'm not standing in the sun.
Okay, so that's the difference. Like, I think about the time when Val and Barbara and all of them, they went to Castle Island, and they were having a vitiligo like picnic or something, overcast day, and they were like, oh, that's good, the sun is not out. They was in the water. They all had to go to the hospital that night because they got 2nd and 3rd degree burns.
Right.
And I didn't realize how sensitive, my skin was until one of those days. We were in Atlantic City. I had on long sleeves. I had on a hat, but I had on a V-neck shirt.
Right.
And, we're walking the boardwalk. And Richard goes, your chest is red. I'm like, why? I'm not, I had to go get some aloe with lidocaine because your shirt is red. That's what color my chest was. So those are the sensitive spots.
Right.
Here and my arms, especially when I'm in the car. So we have my window like tinted.
Right.
But the sun still is going to get
It's still going to get you. Yeah.
So you can't play with that.
Right. My last podcast was talking to Janine. We were talking about that, driving with your arm out the window. I could do that a little bit. I notice I don't do it as much. I think for one, because I'm a little more conscious that my hands hanging out the window, somebody's gonna be freaked out. But then again, I'm like, let them be freaked out. you know. But it's too hot right now. If it's 100 degrees, my arm needs to be inside with the AC on, the window rolled up.
Feel it really fast.
Yes.
It's like I keep the window open because Richard always has the air conditioner on, so the window's closed. And if I even have my hand up, even though the window is tinted, I can feel that.
Feel it, yeah.
So I'm sitting with my hands down on, or I usually keep a shirt in the car that has SPF in it.
Okay.
But it usually doesn't go with anything that I have on, and I don't want to put my clothes. So,
right.
But I'll cover my arm just because that sun is still coming through the front.
Right.
But it's not as forceful. So
absolutely. And for our listeners, one of the things we got to remember too with Universal, I hate to say it, but there's almost no need to try treatments. Most treatments out there are supposed to be used on small parts of the body, in small areas. And with Universal, you think about your whole body. It's really not going to work unless one of our great dermatologists out there comes up with a superior treatment or cure. That could be something different. But with a lot of treatment too, they look at the percentage of spread, and they also look at how long you've had it in terms of treatment. Like me, I'm like, do I really even try to go to treatment at this point? I've had it for so long,
I've said I'll say when I was 50-50, so now I'm going through this, as the little girl once said to me, you look like a monster. I'm going through this monster stage, and they say, there's a cure. I don't know.
No.
Because I'm already a monster. If I do the cure and it does not agree with me,
right?
I mean, I'm not worrying about growing another finger. I just don't want to change to another color.
Right.
Because I've lived this far in with this I want to see what's coming out on the other end. I don't think I would even now. I'm not interested. I tried once when it was starting to get on my hands, and I got some ointment that cost too much money, and I was nauseous. My hand was beet red, and I had a headache. And I'm like, I have 3 kids. I've never been more nauseous. I've never had major headaches. I was like, I don't need this. And I'm done. Look, been there, done one, and I'm one done. So,
and I was the same way. I tried the cream, and what's funny, because I tried the cream back in 95, 96 when I was first diagnosed, and it was like putting on lotion, but it didn't do anything for me. I saw more spread with it, and that's what's interesting about treatments. Certain people respond well to certain treatments.
Yes.
Some people won't respond, and I realize now, as we're learning more about vitiligo, that treatment wasn't designed to work on my hands anyway. It's designed to work on your face. So if I can go back and get a refund from that dermatologist, because he owed me, I don't know, maybe about $80 now. Because I say that, and I have questioned some of the dermatologists when we were at the conference. I say, if a doctor's prescribing you a cream that's designed to only work on your face, why are they telling you to put it on your hands, knowing it's not going to work? Now, Opsilura, I've heard works better on other areas of the body, but I'm not going to test it. I'll let somebody else test it. Because I don't want it at this point. I do support it for those who need it.
Exactly.
But for me, I don't want it, And
listen, the only treatment that I would take, and it ain't got nothing to do with vitiligo, is if somebody wants to give me a free body makeover. I take that.
Look, I say, give me my rescue inhaler because I have asthma. I don't know if y'all can hear it sometimes when I'm talking. I'm like, I got to take a breath here or there. But yeah,
Okay.
like, let me keep my inhaler because that's what I want,
And
and
also autoimmune as well.
yeah, yeah,
So, and that was my trigger
yeah,
of vitiligo. I had a 3-month bout with asthma, had never had asthma before.
yeah.
So I get married, I get a cat, I get asthma, and then I get vitiligo. Well, you just like, hello.
And I often think for me it is I have severe allergies too, so I'm allergic to grass, trees, all that. That's what triggers my asthma.
Okay.
And I do think the three are related.
Yeah.
Because when I'm having those exacerbations and everything, that could trigger something else in my body to make my body attack it. So I
Exactly.
try to stay on top of things with my asthma. I always talk to my asthma specialist. Hey, when COVID hit, she was like, "Hey, we need you on this." And I often tell people, I'm more concerned with how I breathe rather than what I look like.
Oh yeah.
Because if I can't breathe, guess what? I won't be here.
And then you won't have to be worrying about how people be staring
Yeah.
at.
Yeah.
And it's
And-
funny because I tell people that. I say, you worrying about this layer of skin on the
right.
outside. But if you're worrying about it, then other people will be worrying
They
about it.
will. Yeah.
You act like, listen, I always, I have nothing against bigger women, but they are just as proud
Mm-hmm.
and walking,
Yep.
showing their flesh and their shorts and whatever. And here we are, because we got some two-tone
Right.
skin, we want to wear a potato sack.
You know what? But you're right. We are all right. So I was working with I was working with a child in the school system several years ago. And I mentioned this on another podcast. He was in a wheelchair. He couldn't do the things I could do, you
Exactly.
know, but I was struggling with what I look like on the outside. But I'm thinking this kid has so much confidence, but he can't do the things. We got to modify how he plays basketball,
Right.
or he can't kick a ball. So we have to use a tool to help him. He would never have that experience. Um, but for me, I can do these things, but I'm worried about my skin. And I get it for people who are struggling with vitiligo. I understand it. I was there.
Yeah.
And I said I still have my moments where I might struggle. We
But
we
don't you think that the struggle that we all have is just not special to people with vitiligo?
no, it's
The
people.
struggle is with people,
Yeah,
because if you just sit on a bus or a train and you hear two women talking, girl, oh, I can't stand my eyebrows. Oh,
right,
oh,
right.
and oh, my knees. Oh, and I can't wear sandals because my toes are horrible. And oh, and I'm like,
We all are dealing with something. All
it's
of us.
like it's like it's we're never happy.
Right.
And so I say that this vitiligo that we and our community have, we need to be happy that we are different and that people are looking at us. Now you have a reason to speak to people.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can walk in a room and they will stop what they're doing, and all you got to say is, well, I'm the star here. you know
Right.
it, Turn it around and use it for good. Like, you want to know why I look like this? I'd like to know why you look like that, but that's not the point. But because we could point out something with everybody. And I
Right. Right.
I remember telling my grandson-in-law, usually we don't say in-law, but anyway, um they were watching the film More Than Our Skin.
Mm-hmm. And we're gonna get to that in a minute. Yep.
Right. He's in his early 20s, both of them. And he's like, Grandma, I never knew that white people had vitiligo. And I was like, well, why do you think that? He's like, because I don't see white people with it. I said, no, you don't look at white people. I said, as a black man and some black women, we don't look at people, especially black men. You can't look at people in their face or
right.
stare at them because it becomes a problem. I said, that's a stigma that we're stuck with. So you're not gonna look at a white lady, especially not a white lady. You might look at a white man maybe because it's on his hand, but then you're not gonna know what it is because it's in your head that this is a black thing. And that's
Right.
not a black thing. It's people of all races and
Right.
all color. And he was like, wow, I really learned something today. Because it's like you go to church and they're like, oh, this is the black church. It's not a black church.
It's a church.
Saying that. It's
yeah.
you know.
But you know, Pat, you're right. That's a problem we have as a society. We like to put labels on everything. And I'm glad you said that. Vitiligo is not a black person's condition. It happens to any person around the world, male, female. I've had someone ask me, is vitiligo only found in women? I'm a dude. No. I said, no. I said, what you're going to see, though, on TV, you will see more women modeling. They'll show more women with vitiligo. There are just as many women and men equally, with vitiligo, but men don't come to the communities a lot.
No, because they good.
Yeah, I know. I can say that I was one of those dudes. I was good. I'm not going, but it's amazing because I see it now as being one of the leaders here in North Carolina. We could have a group, 30 people show up. It might be, I can count right now 3 dudes who will show up, but there's more than 3 men out there in the community, but only 3 to 4, maybe 5 might show up.
Well, and then the common thing with men, period, across the board, is they don't talk about anything.
Nope.
If it don't have nothing to do with kicking a ball or hitting the ball, they're not talking. They're not even talking to their male friends about having sexual problems.
Right.
Because that's a prideful thing. So you suffer in silence. So now you got vitiligo.
It makes it even worse.
Oh man, y'all messing with my manhood now because people gonna look at me different.
Well, they're gonna look at you different anyway, because now you're hiding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's not it's not said enough. And I mean, I love when we have the conferences and the men go off and they take more time because there's something about one person, starting a party. So that will break down. And I've been to many like married couples things and the women break off and the men and they waiting outside. What's taking y'all so long? Y'all, we don't. So it
We're
has
talking. Yeah.
To the point where now I see that it's changing because if you don't fellowship with like-minded people, you're not going to learn anything, no matter what it is, whatever you have. I think Alcoholics Anonymous has more men going,
right?
Because they want to keep their job. But they still don't talk.
Right, and we got to have those safe spaces for men for us to talk. We got to feel comfortable.
Yes,
and we got to feel safe.
But going is the key.
Going, yeah.
You don't got to talk. You got to be there because if you don't go, you don't know.
Right. And we're going to get into that in just a second before we wrap things up, because I'm going to talk about the documentary. I want to say to anyone listening out there, in particular to the brothers out there, if you are listening to the podcast and you want to share your story, all you have to do is reach out to me. It's just as simple as that. I remember Stacy out of Virginia that reached out to me. Now, I hope I can get him back on. We had a great conversation when we did the radio podcast, and just allowing him that safe space to open up and share his journey. And then to see him now, because we're Facebook friends, and see him stepping out of his comfort zone. That's what we need more of. We need more men to step up and say, my brother, I got you. it's okay for you to share. It's okay for you to talk. It's okay for you to be vulnerable,
Right. And just be in the room.
Right.
You got to be in the room, because otherwise you won't know, what's going on in the room. You don't have to even say anything, but if you're in the room, at least you know who's saying what, and maybe, oh, you know what? Let me tap that brother over there.
Right.
Because being on the outside, you don't know nothing but what you got going on in your head.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because I was on the outside. I didn't know anything about the community. I didn't know anything about the conferences, none of the advocacy work, none of that. I was in my own little world, and it was a little world. But once I got involved, I'm like, oh, there are other people like me that share the same journey, same stories, maybe a little bit different. And now I enjoy the advocacy part. I enjoy reaching out to the community and talking and sharing and doing the podcast and doing all this other stuff. And and what's important, that when you see things that share information about vitiligo, make sure you stop and listen, or you stop and watch, because you're going to learn a lot if you take time out of your day to hear the true and authentic stories from people that live with vitiligo. And that was my plug for you to talk about More Than Our Skin.
More Than Our Skin. Wow. It is an amazing award-winning documentary. It's done by Whole Bay Productions, but the women, the five, we call ourselves the Fabulous Five, but it's really the Fab Six, because Tonya, who is part of Whole Bay Productions, she's one of the women who, she just did an amazing job. It talks about our journey. And we all have different journeys, and that's what's key. But our journey gave us purpose. When things happen to you, you don't know why, but each person, including myself, now I understand why. Because if I didn't have vitiligo, I might not be talking to Mark on the podcast. I
Right.
wouldn't be Vit Friends vice president. I wouldn't have been going to conferences and meeting amazing people. Just because we look different doesn't mean that we're not human. And we are some fun people. And the movie touches bases on everything from advocacy to conferences, and how communities are built because people reach out across the table and welcome people into their homes or their conference rooms, whatever it might be, the case might be. But there's a whole bunch of us, and we all have a story, and it's amazing. I was in Connecticut this past weekend for Millicent Meadows, who is one of the women in the More Than Our Skin doc. And we had a wonderful time. And her pastor is planning a sermon on More Than Our Skin, just because of watching the story. It is available to be seen at any time. If you just go to More Than Our Skin, it will pop up and you can go to the link. It's at this time it's $10 to watch, but there's a sale coming in September where it'll be $7.50. So watch for it, but watch it. Don't let the $10 or the $7.50 hold you back, because there's a lot of information, and it's life altering.
Right. Absolutely.
And I'm glad to be a part of it. And Mark's in it too.
Briefly,
But in it.
just briefly. I'm in it, yes,
You're
briefly. But I was gonna say, excuse me. See, my allergies are starting to kick in now. But it is a wonderful documentary. It is a necessary documentary, because we have to hear what it's like living with vitiligo. You do hear some of the stories from the men, not in detail.
No.
But you'll hear some of it. And I'm hoping in the future that they'll do a part 2, so we can hear from the men, and maybe a part 3 we can hear from the international community.
Yeah, that would
be. And if we can't, excuse me, I would get them on the podcast. And that's what I've been doing. Excuse me to my listeners. Yeah, my allergies are bothering me. I just had a sip of water, and hey, life still goes on.
talking about.
Absolutely. But no, it is powerful. It is powerful. Because you do learn a lot. You learn about the impact of having this condition. Because it's an emotional journey, it's a mental journey, it's a spiritual journey, it is a physical journey as well. And it can impact all aspects of your life to the point that you may not want to continue life, and that is a true thing for some people. And somebody might say, oh, well, it's just your skin. Yeah, but it's not what's on the surface.
It's deeper than skin.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's funny how someone asked the question in the audience when we watched on Saturday about how do we deal with people like looking at us or overlooking us. And she was really kind of talking about relationships. And, my answer was, regardless of what you look like on the outside, if you don't love yourself, no one's going to love you.
Right.
Because you don't know what love is if you can't love yourself. And so, looking for somebody that's not looking at you sideways is not the first bullet point on love.
Right.
Look at yourself. Love yourself. Because stuff is gonna come, and it doesn't have to be vitiligo. Right. And this lady have vitiligo, but she said that she learned just from the film that there are more things bothersome than just having some skin discoloration. if you twist what you see in your head, you can change the outlook that you have in your life, because I never really had the thought with the vitiligo that I didn't want to be here.
Right.
I've had other things in my life happen where I didn't want to be here. So this was like, okay, what's the joke, big guy? Like,
right.
Like, why didn't this all happen all in the time when everything was going? But I was here for a reason, and the vitiligo is a reason. Life is normal if you want it to be normal.
Right.
And
one of the things I've always said to myself is that, okay, vitiligo, I lived the way you wanted me to live for so long, but now you got to live how I want to live. So what I do, you have to do it with me. So I had to reverse it. I had to look at things a different way. If I'm going to the movies, vitiligo, you coming with me.
Hello.
If I'm going to the beach, like I went to spring break. It's so funny. I was talking to my parents and they were just like, why are you going by yourself? I said, because I just want to go to the beach and I'm going to take my vitiligo with me. And that was something I needed to tackle for myself.
And that's a funny statement, because vitiligo didn't ask either of any of us if it was all right for them to tag along with us.
Right.
But you came up with a great solution, and you told vitiligo it had to come with you.
Yeah.
Because it's a mental thing. And I tell people, if you already have low self-esteem, you're not going to be able to deal with it. I don't care if you could win Miss America beauty pageant, but if something is different that you don't like, that's a whole twisted mindset. It's like, oh, people, well, what are you going to do? What do you mean what am I going to do? I'm going to eat, I'm going to sleep, I'm going to sing, I'm going to dance, I'm going to pray, shout, I'm going to cry. Oh, you sure?
Yeah.
But that's what happens
Yeah.
to the mind. Your mind gets turned inside out.
Right. And you know, I had when I started teaching in my own class and not doing a sped class, you know, I said or in a regular education class, and I said, you know, how will the students respond to me? I said, I can't worry about that. I'm here to teach. You know, they ain't thinking about my skin, but I did tell them, I said, I'm gonna share this later, but I said, you guys, we were doing science. We were talking about skin, about the skeletal system, muscular system, the skin, and all that. I said, believe it or not, you have a heads up on the other students because you're going to learn about skin and they're not. I said, because I'm going to share with you the effects on the body and how it impacts your skin. And we started talking about vitiligo.
Mm-hmm.
Man, those kids, they loved it. They had some deep conversations, and they started relating it to like the social study unit. One of the kids, and we're gonna wrap up soon. But one of the kids asked me, "Well, Mr. Braxton, if you lived in the civil rights era, and people did not like people because of the color of their skin, which color would they not like?"
Wow.
I said, you know what? That's a good question. They probably wouldn't like either one. Because now, not only am I one color, I'm two colors, and they probably back then didn't have enough knowledge to know what it was. So,
and most people stayed in hiding.
Yeah.
Because my mom said to me once I told her the diagnosis, she
Mm-hmm.
said, "Oh, we grew up with a man in our building with vitiligo.
He
We
didn't come
just
out.
didn't know what it was, and he wasn't out, just
Right.
vitiligo in the street."
Yeah. You know, and those are true stories. Like I wrote a short story. It's on my page. So if you watch this podcast, you can actually see it. I wrote it for the kids.
Okay.
And it's called V is Not for Vampire. It was talking about vitiligo.
Okay.
And it sums up how kids would see somebody with vitiligo. Like the gentleman, he stayed in the house. He only came out at night. They knew his skin was pale because of no pigmentation. So what did kids do? They said they thought he was a vampire. And it was one kid that knew, and he apologized because there's always one. It's always one kid that knows about vitiligo. And what it was just a way for me to share that these are real stories. You know, although it's done in the form of a kid's story, but we have people that stay in the house. They can't come outside at night. I mean, during the day because of the sun, or they choose not to for whatever reasons. And they come out at night, and you go, like, why is it only coming out at night? And you don't understand it.
And you associate what you know happens at night.
You're right. And as a kid, that's what they would do. We know vampires come out at night. They ain't coming out during the day. Look at his skin. His skin is white. So, you know, it's those little connections and thoughts that, you know, I felt like back then, before we truly knew what vitiligo was, we would put all these myths and stigmas behind that. You know, and now we know and we're more educated, but we still gotta I feel like we still got to teach our kids and figure out how to teach them in a way that they understand it. So that is on, like, when you check out this video, is up with my other vitiligo stuff. But one last thing, Pat. We talked about everything, and I really appreciate that. And that's what this is all about. I want, when people come aboard the podcast, I want them to be able to share, be able to talk. Share openly about their journey. I know we don't get to everything, and we're not supposed to hear everything, you know.
No.
You want to learn more, you finish watching the rest of the video, get to the end. Like, you can go to GVF and other organizations and you can find information. I'll make sure I put that there. Can you share, as we're wrapping up, words of encouragement to anyone out there, whether they have vitiligo or not? Just some type of words of encouragement.
I say it all the time. Love yourself. You know, self-care is amazing, because if you don't love on yourself, you lose your standard of who you are and what you will accept from, whether it's vitiligo or another human being. You know, that was the basis of me not staying in the pit, was that I started to love myself before the vitiligo came.
Right.
So I'm not saying that I didn't have those dark days, but you have to let the love light shine brighter than the dark light, because nothing happens good in the dark. So put the love light on yourself and know that you're worthy to be gazed upon.
Absolutely. Pat, I appreciate you coming on once again. I appreciate those words of wisdom and of encouragement, because I always say, if somebody's out there listening and somebody's going to be encouraged, somebody is going to hear something in this discussion that really makes them say, you know what, I want to do things differently. Or they might even say, you know what, I'm going to seek out a support community, or just start opening up and talking about their journeys, their stories, and all these things. And that's the whole purpose of this, you know, to educate, awareness and education. So
Yes.
I greatly appreciate you being here. And for our listeners, I thank you, and watchers, because I got to remember, this is not just radio. I'm used to saying for our listeners, viewers, you know, those who are out here viewing this podcast, I greatly appreciate you being here. Thank you for those that have subscribed, so you can know when the next video is coming out. I know you mentioned relationships earlier. I will have a relationship coming out, counselor coming on soon. I just haven't set the date yet. So I'm talking to a little bit of everybody, because I feel like there's going to be something for somebody, not always vitiligo.
Very good. Sounds
absolutely
like a bowl of fruit cocktail.
Absolutely. Wow, I haven't had fruit cocktail in a long time. I might need some. No, somebody's going to say, last time he was talking about donuts. Yeah, hey, food is good for you. This is a little food for your soul here.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, I thank you for tuning in. You have been listening to Living Life and Love with Vitiligo. I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. Just remember, as Pat mentioned about love, you know, I always end it on the same note. Make sure you love somebody. Love your family members, love your kids, your neighbors, your spouse, love your coworkers. I always say love that person that cut you off on the highway, because we don't know what they're going through, although we might be going through some stuff too, but still love that person, pray for them, because you don't know what people are dealing with. But most of all, look in the mirror and tell yourself, I love you, because we don't do enough of that. Y'all take care, and peace.